Okay, so for the chapter 14 review, we're only covering lessons 14.1 to 14.4. 14.5 and 14.6 are not covered. They are not part of our standards, so we skip them. We skip them anyways, and we're not just skipping them because we don't have school, okay? So we're only doing 1 to 13, the odds. So it's not too many problems. Make sure you do a really good job and really focus in on just these few. All right, number 1, find the unit rate. So we have 289 miles, which I'm going to abbreviate, on 10 gallons. Well, unit rate means we want this second number to be a 1. Okay, so we want to know how many miles on 1 gallon. So in order to get from 10 to 1, we divide by 10. Do the same to the numerator, and we get 28.9 miles on 1 gallon. When we write out the unit rate, we take it out of this form and we write it out 28.9 miles. We use the per to represent the number 1 gallon. Okay? Number 3. So for number 3, they give us this whole big table with lots of numbers, and it asks us to find the unit rate in terms of calories per serving. Well, remember, per means 1. So it wants to find how many calories for 1 serving. So you can take any of the sets of numbers out of the table and use them in your proportion. I would just opt for the first set of numbers because they're the smallest. But be very careful because in the table, servings is presented on top, but we need to make sure it matches up with servings over here. So this was 2 servings on the bottom, and it was 240 calories in those 2 servings. So in order to get from 2 to 1, we divide by 2. So cut 240 in half, and we get 120 calories in 1 serving. So again, we have to take it out of the table. We would write it 120 calories per serving. Okay, number 5. Tell whether the rates form a proportion. So we have a couple options for doing this. We're comparing 12 and 20 to 22 and 18 to 33. So one way we can do this is to reduce. We can find cross products. It doesn't really matter. We can find a common denominator. I'm just going to reduce. So I'm going to divide these by 2. And I get 6 over 11. Then I'm going to divide these by 3, and I come up with 6 over 11. Because the ratios are equal, we would say, yes, they do form a proportion. Okay? Same idea for number 7. So now we're given 32 to 40 and 12 to 15. So again, you can use cross products, you can reduce, you can find a common denominator. I always like to reduce when possible, just a personal preference. So the first ratio, I'm going to divide by 8, and I get a 4 to 5 ratio. And then the second ratio, I'm going to divide by 3, and I get, 4 to 5. So these ratios are equivalent. So we would say, yes, these 2 ratios are proportional, or they can form a proportion. Okay, number 9. use the table to write a proportion. Okay, so anytime we write a proportion, we need guiding words. So we're comparing penalties to minutes. And in game 1, it was a 6:16 ratio. In game 2, it was an 8:m ratio. And when we write a proportion, we just say that these two ratios are equal. Okay, now you might see the words written in it like this. Oops, this was penalties. Okay, 8 penalties to m minutes. Okay, you might even see the whole proportion flipped with minutes across the top and penalties across the bottom. It doesn't matter as long as you're consistent with where you put your numbers. Okay? Number 11. Okay, so the last two, we're solving the proportion. We have x over 4 equals 2 over 5. And okay, so I don't know how to get from 5 to 4. I can't reduce 2/5. So I'm going to use cross products here. Okay, remember cross products are always equal. So 5 times x we would write as 5x. 4 times 2 is 8. Cross products are always equal when the ratios are equal. Okay, then we would divide by 5 to get the variable alone. Do the same to the other side. Unfortunately, it doesn't go in evenly, so divide. 8 by 5 goes in once. At 5, subtract, I get 3. Bring down. 5 into 30, 6 times evenly. So x equals 1.6. Okay, last one, number 13. 8 over 20 equals 6 over w. You can jump in and just start to solve it right away. You can jump in and use cross products right away. I always prefer to reduce my ratio if possible. I just am working with smaller numbers. It's not required. You don't have to. You'll get the same answer. So 8/20 would reduce to 2/5. Drop in the second half of the proportion. Now that I reduced, I don't even have to use cross products. I can just use equivalent ratios. 2 times 3 gets me to 6. 5 times 3 is 15. So W equals 15. Okay, just one way to do it. Hope that helped. If you need more practice, do the odds on the practice test and then check the answers.